Hello and welcome to Widdecombe, Webb and Woberts. My name is Emma Webb and I'm your host, and I'm here today with the former Shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdecombe and comedian Abi Roberts. And you can contact us throughout the show, where we'll be taking your questions and comments. You can send them to us via the live stream or through email at contact@newcultureforum.org.uk, or you can tweet us at #NCFWWW. So this week we have an awful lot to talk about. We have seen those pesky protesters on the M25 ruining people's lives and stopping people from getting to hospital. We've also seen another mad descent, if you can believe that it's possible, in the gender debate into even rougher waters. We're also going to be discussing the state of art in the age of identity politics and whether policing is threatening our free speech, as well as updates around the case of Shamima Begum. So that's a lot to get through. So let's start with Extinction Rebellion. Do you think that climate protesters have gone too far?
Well, they've been going too far for rather a long time. I think it's not a question of have they gone too far, it's have the police gone anywhere at all? Because I have, as I comment in my Express column tomorrow, I don't know when the police became so utterly feeble and hopeless that they go up to a group of people who are obstructing a road on which emergency vehicles are travelling, and the latest is that some poor soul had a stroke. It took her son 6 hours to get through this demonstration, and by that time she was paralysed because you need to deal with strokes very quickly, and yet the police do nothing. Now, the Home Secretary did kick them into some sort of action on Friday, but it wasn't much, and my view is very straightforward. They need to be arrested, they need to be charged, and they need to be given a lot of hours of unpaid community service.
So the counter argument has been that they are entitled to protest. They're expressing their free speech, but what they're doing is, you say, they're shutting down critical infrastructure, which is something that Extinction Rebellion and this group is actually called Insulate Britain. So they're actually
sounds like a British gas advert, doesn't it?
Well,
Insulate
so
Britain.
this lady who suffered a stroke and is now it was avoidable. She wouldn't have been paralysed if she'd have been able to get to hospital within 90 minutes, but instead was stuck on the M25 for 6 whole hours. And there was also another woman in her 50s who had to be airlifted to hospital after a multi-vehicle crash that they were saying was because all of this traffic was backed up on the M25. Ironically, apparently there was a thermal engineer stuck in there who was on his way to insulate people's homes.
The irony.
So they're doing this because they think that the government should insulate everyone's homes and in the process causing chaos for everyone's lives. But Extinction Rebellion for a very long time have been doing things that are criminal. Things like digging up the lawn of Trinity College, Cambridge, and dumping it outside of a bank, vandalising people's buildings.
They don't pay any price, do they?
And the police just seem to stand by and do nothing, just as they did during the Black Lives Matter protests.
It's very strange. The police seem to. It's okay for some people to protest, but not others. And I would say, I would actually say, this isn't protest. Being on public highways and stopping ambulances and cars getting through. This is they're a terrorist organisation. Because they are inflicting damage on our country when we're already on our knees after all the coronavirus restrictions. The police, unless they get tough, I mean, they were offering them a cup of tea. These people were glued to the tarmac.
It sounded more like they were on a school trip. Yeah, if there's anything that we can do to help,
on a cruise,
more comfortable.
But what are they doing for the people who are held up and who desperately need
what are they doing for those people?
All of that footage of people having to take it into their own hands, and then the police going and treating the people who had intervened in a more heavy-handed way than they were treating the protesters.
Oh, they always do. Yeah. They'll always say, you must leave that to the police, but the police don't do anything. That's why people take the law into their own hands.
But why do you think this is? Is it politicised policing, or is it just because they don't know what to do? They don't know.
They do know what to do, but they don't do it because they are now so politically correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it is worth saying that there are some very brave officers who do lose their lives in the cause of protecting the public. It's worth saying that, but nevertheless, the mass of the police force now, wherever you look in whichever part of the country, is just dominated by political correctness instead of by common sense and the protection of the public, which is what they're supposed to be about, I thought.
It's really absurd. It's like sixth form or sort of, sort of sixth form politics has taken over everything. Remember, they used to be on the fringes, these people, largely. The climate change thing has become now has become almost like a mainstream view, because all the others, and I know you feel strongly about this, all the other views about the fact that maybe the planet's cooling, solar activity has been completely excluded from the argument. So this has now become almost like it must be right.
Did you
because
see
everyone's saying
on Good Morning Britain, Richard Madeley challenging one of these protesters by reading out the definition of fascism?
Fascism, yeah.
And he had a point, and this is, Policy Exchange released a report, I think it was last year, maybe in the year before, questioning whether Extinction Rebellion were an extremist group, because they have this apocalyptic worldview where they think that all of their actions, even if they're criminal, are justified because the end of the world is nigh. And it's this sort of, I don't know if you saw that it's just so outrageous, like a sort of bourgeois apocalypticism, that they did a whip round for one of these businesses that they had closed down as a result of the protest, and the guy who owned the business refused to take it. But it was just such a brilliant display of the class difference, this very posh sounding guy trying to hand their money over to this just working guy who runs a cafe.
I'm surprised they even recognise somebody who worked for a living with the Tabithas and Tarquins are there. Let's all. I mean, but it's
an insult to their pride.
And also CO2. I don't know if you saw yesterday. There's a serious worry about packaging meat. Because CO2's needed to package meat.
And CO2 has been the enemy.
CO2,
enemy
precisely.
number one.
It's like,
Suddenly we haven't got enough of it.
What's wrong with CO2? Exactly. It's public enemy number one, and nobody can find it anywhere. I wonder. Can we? I mean, it's bizarre. It's like, what's wrong with carbon? What's wrong with the? I mean, everything made out of carbon. I mean, I'm wrong in saying that. I think we are. I think even we're made of carbon. So I mean, I think it's loony. The lunatics have taken over the asylum.
Just quickly to go back to the sorts of people who have involved themselves in this protest. I don't know if you saw the description in some of the news reportings of the careers. One of them's a puppeteer. There's a vegan business coach. You couldn't make enough. An organic farmer apparently who compares himself to Mahatma Gandhi. So Chris,
sounds great.
Harrison at all.
Can't wait to have dinner with them.
On the subject of what to do about these protesters, Chris from Plymouth has said police should use water cannons to move these protesters.
I think soap will be good. just shower them with some soap.
But we got rid of the water cannons anyway. That wasn't something that Boris...
Theresa May got rid of the water cannons. Boris ordered some for London to deal with just this sort of situation. And Theresa May ordered him to stand them all down.
The thing is, though, so I just think I shouldn't laugh, but the problem with water cannons when people have glued themselves is, if you aim a water cannon at someone is glued, it's not going to end very well, because they're just. I mean, do you need some solvent to get rid of? I can't believe we're having this discussion.
The whole thing is such clownery that you say water cannons, and I think clown cannons firing someone in a cannonball, some kind of circus act on the M25.
It's lunacy. And what's this got to do with, I mean, it's strange. When I hear someone say climate change denier, the climate's been changing for, millions of years. Why are we... that phrase...
Hear the debate. We
don't hear it. The other side of it, it's quite extraordinary.
And one of the reasons I'm convinced is that there is now so much money invested in university research departments and in other research areas, so much money invested in climate change, that it would actually cause a lot of people to suffer a lot of loss.
Exactly.
If the debate really got underway.
Exactly. If the little boy said, I don't think that emperor's got no clothes on. Yeah, so you're right.
We've got two comments here. One from Mark, who says, how many people missed family funerals, flights and other important events? And Connor from Sandbanks says, what about pregnant women rushing to hospital to give birth? I'm ashamed at our weak police. There's also another comment here from Sally from Margate, who said that if our police were as tough as they are in other countries, many of these privileged middle-class protesters would likely stay at home. So... you know.
But what's wrong with the very basic principle that we all used to subscribe to, which is nobody is above the law? What's wrong with that?
Yes.
Why are these people suddenly above the law?
But is there another element to this as well, that now protesters have this such a degree of hubris that they think that their cause is it's such an emergency that, because we live in a society now where emergency justifies almost anything, that they think, well, it's such an emergency, it doesn't matter, those pregnant women, this is just collateral damage because the world is about to end.
And the problem
so
is, a lot of the police with their rainbow cars, etc., also believe that. That's the problem. They're not acting in a sort of in an unbiased way by sort of treating everyone sort of to do with the law. They're looking at things in an ideological way, which you know where that leads to.
While we're on the subject of policing, or the lack of. You may have also seen this week Norfolk police. There was a Norfolk policeman who was having a conversation with what I assume from the video was
one of his relatives,
an anti-abortion, an anti.
Sorry,
Norfolk incest joke there, Abby.
Sorry.
Norfolk policeman who was explaining, I don't know if you saw the video, explaining to this anti-abortion protester that holding his banner, being offensive, making offensive remarks in a protest was equivalent to assault, equivalent to punching someone in the face.
What did the banner actually say?
I don't know.
You know
but you could tell from the video that it was something to do with abortion. And the guy on the other side was like, I'm protesting peacefully, I'm being very reasonable. And what was interesting about this, which also relates to the climate protesters and so on, is that the subjectivity of this policeman. He was just stating his own opinion as if his own opinion was the law. And he was saying that the guy who was protesting said, well, what if I am offended by the blue checks on your uniform? And the policeman said, well, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you could see that from what he was saying, he was just saying, because I think that it's that what you're saying is offensive. He said that that it could trigger trauma. And that we live in a society now where that your words could trigger trauma, and that is equivalent to punching someone in the face.
My God, China must be looking at us and absolutely, they must be laughing their heads off. With us navel-gazing about words equal violence.
So all the Russians.
And the Russians, yes, and Iran.
But from a policing perspective, surely this is total chaos, because nobody really knows. The policemen don't even seem to know what the law is.
Well, they don't.
And the police are selectively policing. We've seen selective policing for months now.
The judges have said in terms, nobody has the right not to be offended. I mean, that is actually...
Causing offence is not an offence.
Been as a judgment. Yeah, and yet the police don't seem to have absorbed that.
But is this a problem with the policemen themselves, the policemen on the ground?
The institution.
Or is it a problem with the bosses in the police?
It's the problem.
That they're not adequately trained to even understand what the law is?
I think it's the police college and the training that's there.
It's common purpose. Has a lot to answer for. This little, the Marxist tentacles, going through the sort of the long march, little tentacles going through, which includes things like words equal violence. And if you hear that often enough, you'll believe it. And I think that's what happens.
You see the police misrepresenting the law, like they did when they had that big slogan on the back of a bus where they said, being offensive is an offence, or something to that effect.
That was actually not the law. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're sort of rewriting it in their own image. I mean, I think I said a few months ago, we are in sort of Maoist, very strange territory here.
It's this plague, the plague of subjectivity, because, like with the college, you mentioned the College of Policing, they are an unaccountable quango that came up with an entirely new category of recording of non-crime hate incidents, which was what the policeman Harry Miller had on his record, with the famous police phoning him up and saying they were going to check his sinking. That they're recording these non-crime hate incidents.
I thought you said check his sinking for a minute. Harry, are you there? All you can hear is the bubbling down the phone. Sorry, check his thinking, not his check whether he's sinking.
Yeah, so they've created this entire category of reporting. This is not something that Parliament has agreed, but yet it's something that can go on your record and show up in an advanced DBS check. It just seems as if the police have forgotten what the police are supposed to do. That slogan that's become overused.
We live in a free society. That's what they've forgotten.
I'm not sure we do anymore.
Well, maybe not, but what they have forgotten is that they are supposed to be policing on the basis that we live in a free society.
Yes.
And that just does not apply now. And it's not only in policing, it doesn't apply anywhere. And unless your views match state orthodoxy, you're going to be penalised for having them.
Yeah.
And I don't believe any citizen should have a record of any sort unless it has been imposed by a court.
But is this a problem not just to do with the police, but also to do with the culture around law?
It's in all institutions
We've
now.
been seeing for years and years this habit of legislating for things where there is already legislation in place, or even the Scottish hate crime bill is a perfect example of this. The idea that you can, and it's very Orwellian, that you can legislate people's hearts and minds. So like with the Scottish hate crime bill, and now with the proposals in Northern Ireland for a similar hate crime bill, they want to bring in legislation that will, as they put it, make Scotland a nicer place, make Scotland a better place. But the implication of that is that they want to moderate your speech with the intention to moderate your thought.
They want to suppress your speech.
Well, it is Orwellian in the
is.
deepest, most basic sense, because the whole point is that they want to try and make people think more nicely.
Yeah.
They're trying to affect.
I'll tell you who's to blame for this. Julia Middleton, who started Common Purpose, the daughter of a Marxist, then she became a Marxist, and this has been going on for 25, maybe more years, where they do courses that you go on, and it's all this is what it's led to is a total reimagining of society. She's one of the people.
What I don't get is this, and I really don't get this. The vast majority of the population are where you and I are on this. They want free speech. They believe that as long as you're not committing any crime, you can hold what opinions you like, and providing you don't do it in a way which generates violence, you can state those opinions. And if you go out and you do any public opinion poll, people want free speech.
That's right.
And yet the establishment, the whole of the establishment, is conspiring to prevent free speech and even free thought, if only it could.
Yeah.
How intentional do you think it is, though? Is it just sleepwalking into it because there's this culture
or the institutions?
With the institutions.
Oh no, it's deliberate.
So I think
Absolutely
I mean in Scotland, I think it's probably quite deliberate. I think that's what they're intending to do. But do you think that it's a change in culture? It's something in the zeitgeist.
I think it varies. I think sometimes you're right. I think
it was started a way back, didn't it?
But I also think that there is an awful lot of sleepwalking, that people are just absorbing a message, this is nice and that's not. And we'll always have what's nice, and we can't hear from what's not nice. And I think people have sleptwalked into it, but we've got a government. We've got a government. Now, what is it going to do? And the answer at the moment seems to be nothing.
Well, and also the government are all common-purposed up to the hilt as well. It's got everywhere. It's infected everything. This whole, which is one of their things in Common Purpose. I only know because my late husband knew a lot about it, and so he worked in government, and he saw the effect of it. But one of their sort of mantras is act beyond your authority. And again, if you hear that often enough, it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, look at someone like Cressida Dick. Or Sadiq Khan, for that matter.
This is a point that goes all the way back to John Stuart Mill and what the limits of the state should be. It seems that every single institution no longer knows what that institution's purpose is. They don't see themselves as part of a delicate ecosystem where each part has a function. They keep trying to go beyond that remit. Like I was saying with over-legislating.
Acting beyond your authority.
Government institutions no longer know what they're supposed to be doing. They don't know what their limits are. They don't recognise the importance of their limits for protecting people's freedom. Because they think that they can just expand and expand and expand more and more into people's lives and into their heads.
Yes. And the sort of feelings matter more than facts. The fact that I'm sort of really upset.
Patricia from Bournemouth says, policemen need to be reminded of the playground rhyme, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Indeed.
Whatever happened to that? I remember that from primary school. It's a mantra that I still live by.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but you can always find something to offend a feminist. That's what I quite like.
Classic Peter
We've just
Lloyd.
lost Patricia from
Citation
Bournemouth
Peter Lloyd.
has logged off.
We've also got a comment here from Max from Edgbaston. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yes, you are.
I find the policeman's stupidity to be offensive. Can I ask for him to be charged with assault, please?
For his
As far as I'm concerned, they should all be charged with dereliction of duty.
Yes.
A whole lot of them.
Exactly.
So another subject that has been in the news a lot over the past couple of weeks has been developments in the gender debate. So yes, as I'm sure this will please you, yesterday the Court of Appeal overturned the High Court judgment from December last year that in the Keira Bell case.
Yeah.
Keira Bell is this lady who she transitioned to being a boy and then detransitioned back, and feels that the medical establishment has become politicised.
She did all that as a young teenager.
Yeah, and so now
Yes.
she is incredibly brave, incredibly brave woman. Took this to the High Court. The High Court found in her favour that puberty blockers shouldn't be given to children under the age of 16. Because of consent issues, and this was then challenged in the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal has overturned the judgment. Stonewall is very happy, obviously, and so there have been a number of different, news coming out about this in the last couple of days. Even, another example of why Keira Bell is so brave, because women who do speak out about these sorts of things do get a lot of vitriol.
To say the
Rosie
least.
Duffield, who's a Labour MP, has actually had to, as reported yesterday, that she's not going to be going to the Labour Party conference because her safety can't be insured, because she's received so many threats after she posted a tweet saying that only women have a cervix. And she's been quite clear. She's fine with trans rights and all of that, and gay rights and so on.
But she stated a fact.
But she is in favour, and actually,
terrible. My feelings.
What I think is really important about this is that Rosie Duffield did. If you remember, she did a speech in Parliament, a really emotional speech. I was choked up by it, where she was talking about how she had been a victim of domestic abuse. Now she thinks, rightly, I think, that women's only spaces, sex based on biological sex, should be protected.
Well, of course they should.
In the case of toilets and prisons and
refuges.
Irrelevant to her case, refuges for women who have been victims of domestic abuse.
Absolutely.
But what is me is, going back to your Keira Bell case, is we've now abandoned the principle of protecting children. I mean, a child of 10 or 12 cannot take a decision in the same way that a young person of 17 or 18 can. I mean, they just can't. It is impossible in terms of development. And yet we've lost now the idea that A, you protect the children, B, you need parental consent before a child can take any sort of decision that an adult would normally take. We've lost it. We've lost it completely, and it's all about rights. And actually, a child's first right is to be protected by the grown-up world.
Yes.
That is the child's first right.
And they have just started rolling out experimental vaccines for children aged 12, and it's going to go lower and lower and lower. I mean, honestly, if this was back in the 1918 and the Titanic, all the blokes would be getting on it'd be like women and children would be going down with the ship. That's how much it's changed.
We're seeing the undermining of parental consent in all sorts of areas. I mean, obviously
just
there's the
absurd.
stuff around vaccines, whether it was like, well, parental consent will be sought, but we might override it if the child wants it and they disagree with their parents. So that's sort of not really parental consent being sought in any meaningful way.
Well,
but also with the new guidance in Scotland that was issued for schools, that schools don't need to get parental consent or even tell the parents if their child wants to identify and socially transition by identifying using other pronouns, if they're a girl, being a boy in school, that the parents don't even have to be consulted about this.
What are parents for? They are supposed to be the guides, the authority,
the role models,
and the ones who are responsible. And if their children don't go to school, they are responsible.
Yeah.
But if they want to take a view on what a child is taught, then suddenly they're completely sidelined, and we've undermined parental consent.
Completely. That's another thing the Marxists have done, thanks to common purpose, the family unit has broken down. So that what you're seeing now is you're seeing parents who are sort of want more. They want to be the child's friend, and they're sort of, with a rainbow-coloured hair, as opposed to saying, learn your times table, behave, get educated, you know, have a happy life.
It's
all gone.
fault.
It's all Rousseau.
It's all
God, how far are
Rousseau's
we going? It's all Rousseau. Damn him and his romanticism. But yes, I think there's a lot of, you know, neo-Marxist stuff in here.
But I think so. There's a comment here from Gemma from Middlesbrough, who says that many of these kids are gay, not trans. They're confused teens discovering their sexuality. So there are issues around there, you know, from a gay rights perspective. There are gay rights activists who are concerned about that particular point. But also, for me, it seems like from the news over the last couple of days, it's less about the trans side of the debate, and it's become more about protecting sex-based rights, because you can't have women's rights unless you recognise biological sex. It's not possible.
Yes.
And so
there are gay men being thrown under the bus by these dreadful people who are saying there's no such thing as same-sex attraction. I mean, it literally is like, you know, there's a war on reality. What's happened?
Well,
you know,
and there's also a war on the dictionary, because Natalie Bird, I don't know if you've heard of Natalie Bird. She's a member of the Free Speech Union. She's a Liberal Democrat, and she's been banned from standing for office for 10 years because she wore a T-shirt that said "woman, adult, human, female," which is the dictionary definition. Banned by the unliberal anti-democrats. And Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, went on the Andrew Marr show, and when he was questioned about why this was a problem, and I think Andrew Marr did a really good job of questioning him on it, he said the reason why is because the phrase, he said, quote, "this is the dictionary definition, doesn't really encapsulate the debate. A trans woman is a woman, a trans man is a man."
Which is just nonsense. Again, what these people, what are they doing? They're aiding and abetting, aren't they? The lunacy. That's what, I mean, you're right, Anne. It's like, where are the people that are saying, no, we're not going to be doing this anymore?
But it's not only that. I mean, you are now not allowed to have an opinion in the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
You know, you're now not allowed to have an opinion on a matter of fact.
Yes.
Within the Liberal Party.
But how can it be that the dictionary definition is something that could exclude you from running for the Liberal Democrats? It just doesn't make any sense. Another thing in the news this week, brilliant article in the Express about Gillian Phillip, the children's author, who stood up for J.K. Rowling on Twitter. Yeah. She was chucked out by her publisher, and she has retrained as a HGV driver. And she says, as a woman who form a very small proportion of HGV drivers, that it's a far more tolerant industry than publishing. And it just seems, you know, day after day, there are so many cases of, these are just women who are standing up for women's rights, their right to same-sex spaces, which I think the majority of women in the country would agree with. I'm
sure they do.
Yeah.
It's the only way to... Women fought and, you know,
died
to secure these rights.
How can you have a biological man in a woman's refuge?
Yes.
How can you?
Yes.
What sort of safety does that give the woman?
But there's an element of heartlessness about it as well.
Or hospital wards.
Like particularly in the case of Rosie Duffield, it's just heartless to, I think, given her experiences of domestic abuse, there's just something heartless about
like
saying
JK
to women, no, you're not allowed to have
and JK Rowling
refuge.
had exactly the same experience, and that's one of the things that she... I mean, I tweeted support for JK Rowling last year. My God, was that a mistake? My agent dropped me because I mean, quite subtly dropped me. I mean, just didn't return any of my calls because I'd come out in support of JK Rowling and what she said, and supporting reality, the reality of biological sex. I mean,
but if that can happen to JK Rowling, who's our big figure, you know, what is it like for little Mr. and Mrs. Ordinary?
Precisely. Who suddenly find, you know, that they've lost their job at Asda or, you know, Marks and Spencers, and they're sorry, I'm not advocating, you know, sorry, that's not product placement. Just the first things I could think of. What recourse because then if they go to their, you know, the HR people are going to say, well, you shouldn't really have said it. Yeah. So there's nobody. You're right. There's no recourse
And people
for
are being
legal
punished for, things they've tweeted at the age of 13 or 14.
Yes.
And they're now adults, probably
Yeah.
take a slightly different line, or
Yeah.
may take a slightly different line.
Yeah.
But they can still actually lose their jobs or be suspended or whatever
Yeah.
it is for something they said
blacklisted.
when they were 13 or 14.
And it's always the classic that it's usually the people who are actually on the left that are the ones that get attacked and mobbed. Because
Yeah.
I guess it's the sort of classic, what was it that Orwell said, that communists hate socialists even more than they hate capitalists. Or something
Yes,
to
yeah,
that
exactly.
effect. But there's something in that they always go for
their
they're
own.
going for feminists. They're going for people who are more traditionally on the left.
Because nobody can be pure enough. These people are so obsessed with ideology, but the ideology has to be pure. And like Anne said, there's no room for disagreement in the Liberal Party, which you're meant to the Liberal Party, which is yes. So we're
Isn't it strange that when Tim Farron was obviously done
Yes.
away with from the Lib Dems because of his views on abortion, he held traditional religious views on subjects like abortion,
Yeah.
And it was incompatible with his Christian faith to be a leader of the Liberal Democrats. Now, those pro-abortion activists presumably would be doing so from campaigning, they would say, from a feminist perspective. So how bizarre that now we're at a point where the Liberal Democrat, the whole thing is just so fudged. None of it makes any sense.
No.
It's such a mess.
I call it sort of moral gymnastics. If these people went to the Olympics,
Amoral.
they would win on the sort of the
contortion.
the contortion. Yes, exactly. The woke gymnastics.
But how do you think that history is going to judge this? How do you think that, because like if you were
With
trying to imagine
disbelief, I
unpicking this in
think.
hindsight.
With disbelief. I
With
think.
disbelief.
With
yeah.
total disbelief. I mean, I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And I had thought, and I was quite wrong about this, but I had thought that when the COVID crisis started, because for the first time since the Second World War we had something actually real that was disrupting our way of life, and we had something to actually worry about, something real to worry about, that we wouldn't have any patience with all this
Yes.
other stuff.
Yeah.
And yet it's gone the other way completely. And somehow
I was one of those mugs who wagered incorrectly on
Thought,
that.
almost like thank goodness for coronavirus.
I
'cause
thought
it'll
it
make
was.
us.
I thought it was the end of
Sense
madness.
of proportion.
I was very
Yep.
wrong. It was the
Yes.
beginning.
So was I.
Yeah.
Another thing that has been reported this week is, again, more guidance for schools in Scotland. It seems to be something that is happening a lot in Scotland. For schools in Dumfries and Galloway, a new guide for primary school teachers and pupils aged 9 to 11 on how to use inclusive pronouns and the difference between gender, biological sex. And interestingly, in the article about this, it said that 200 pupils seek support to transition in Scotland every year. 200. That is very high.
It's the adults who are, it's child abuse, essentially. I really think it's like, if you want to be a crazy adult, go and do it in your own time. Go and have your own island, but don't inflict it on young people, because that's what's happening, isn't it? It's the weird, the ideology of the kind of fringe is now being imposed on the next
from
generation.
Their
We've
perspective.
forgotten,
Isn't it?
as I said
Yeah.
earlier on, a child's first right is to be
Yeah.
protected by
Yes.
the grown-up world.
Yeah.
From
quite
their
extraordinary.
perspective, though, they would say that they're doing it out of compassion. Because if when Stonewall were commenting on this this Court of Appeal judgment, they said that, and not that I'm certainly not advocating for Stonewall's view here, but just to put it to you, they said that the previous ruling left young people in limbo without vital healthcare support. So it's being framed as this is a healthcare
Dreadful.
thing, rather than it being viewed as an issue to do with the safeguarding of children, because the argument, of course, is that children don't know what they're consenting to, and Keira Bell's argument is that these are children who are being put on a pathway towards sterilisation, which is the consequence of taking these hormones.
I think it's
inevitably.
Munchausen's by proxy. I think it's what it is.
We have enough cases in the adult world of people who've transitioned and who then transition back again.
Yes.
Because they've
Yeah.
got it wrong. Now, if adults can get it wrong, how much more likely is it that children are going to get it wrong? Just
So-
how much more likely?
It's like inflicting, I'm going to sound very old-fashioned now. It's like inflicting a perversion on young minds rather than focusing on being free, climbing trees, experimenting with who they are. Adults have gone, tell you what, we're going to put all our neuroses onto you, little Jimmy or little,
And you can take adult
Tara.
decisions. That's what we're
You can
saying.
take our decisions,
You can take
yeah.
adult decisions.
Yeah.
Now, no child should ever be expected to take an adult decision.
But again, this is Rousseau again, though, isn't it? Because it's the idea that the children, it's like child-led learning. The idea that the children should be leading the way because they know better than we do.
The tyranny of
Greta
children.
Effect. It's the
I can't believe I just said that.
It's the Greta effect.
Yeah, the Greta effect, exactly. Let's choose a little Greta, bless her, as sort of like a little, yes, she's being used for adult, what's the word, for pushing sort of crazy ideas. I know, let's use a child as the poster for this.
Well, she wouldn't say it like that.
No, of course not.
She wouldn't say it like that at
No.
all. She would say that she feels very strongly about this anyway.
Of course,
and
because she's
this is
been
what
so
she wants to
brainwashed.
do. Well, I mean, there's an awful lot of brainwashing going on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just think in terms of the trans stuff, you cannot expect children who barely know what sex is.
Yes.
To take
it's horrible.
really major decisions of that order of magnitude.
Yeah. And the socialists, am I right in saying the left are really, it's weird how they're connected with this, because was it Harriet Harman with a paedophile information, whatever it's called, I was going to say agency, that's the wrong word, PIE. They pushed a lot of that, that sort of thing of like, oh, well, if children are sort of fair game, and they're not. They should never be. In a civilised society.
I don't think they would have put it that way, but
No.
I think, to be fair to them, I don't think they would ever have put it that way. But I think that what was happening was they were pushing a liberal agenda.
Yes.
Seeing it as a matter of morality rather than a matter of child protection.
Do you
Yes,
think that
exactly,
there's an element
exactly.
to this of confusion, that generally the British public are nice, good, decent people who want to be kind, and so there are some who have a kind of radical gender ideology or any other sort of more radical ideology, and if they present it as being the new way to be nice, then people are too frightened to speak against it because they don't want to be viewed as being
people
unkind.
are speaking against it in their own homes. They're speaking against it in conversations in the pub. They're speaking against it. They're very chary about speaking against it on social media because they know what can happen.
Yeah.
But people are muttering. And that's why I'm glad that we now have we've got a little clutch of initiatives on free speech. You've got Toby Young, for example, in his Free Speech Union. And so that there is some sort of pushback, but it's nothing like enough.
No.
And won't be until Mr. and Mrs. Ordinary feel they can say what they think.
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with a very well-known comedian the other day, a female comedian, household name, about this stuff. And she said, well, I would say things, but I sort of worry. That I said, well, don't worry. You're in a position to say things.
A comedian can get away with more than most.
Well, yeah,
So
exactly.
Before
I
can't believe I'm going to say this. Before I segue onto an even more controversial subject,
even more.
I just want to mention Mark, who says it's becoming hell on earth, and to thank you, Mark, for your super chat. So, onto a more controversial subject. The English touring opera, it was reported this week, have dropped 14 musicians from their orchestra because of a diversity drive. So these are white musicians from the ages of, I think it's 55 to 60. I may be getting those numbers wrong. But they've dropped 14 musicians in this diversity drive. Straight after the pandemic, they won't be going on the next tour. And everybody is quite roundly criticising this and condemning it as racist.
Well, it is racist.
Yeah.
It is absolutely racist. If racial equality means that we're all treated equally, then those musicians have been treated unequally.
Yes.
And I actually say in my Express column tomorrow, I say that I think the ETO has hit a wrong note. And that is exactly what I do think.
Very nice. Wah, 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 wah.
In the same vein, it was also reported this week that a Royal Holloway music professor has quit over concerns about the turn that music education is taking. And his concern that the faculty would stop teaching Beethoven and Wagner.
Why?
And we've seen this before.
Sorry, why are they stopping?
Oh, because it's not
Colonialist.
In this instance, because
Yes.
they wrote music in the time of empire. And if you remember, actually, the British Library were talking about removing the busts of Beethoven and Mendelssohn because they were somehow centering white supremacism. I'm just paraphrasing the sort of thing I imagine they would say. But this has become a real thing in classical music. And Abby, you are so the one to talk on this, on the subject of opera. But it's become a real thing in classical music that it's being viewed as being white and white supremacist and needing to be decolonised.
Yes, I mean it's crazy. I don't know. Music to me is the one thing that shouldn't have any boundaries or be obsessed with the colour of people's skin or what they look like or it's the most universally uplifting thing in the world. And what's going to happen, as with all this rubbish, is that the left is going to just throw away joy for people. And that's what I really, really hate. I'd love to get these people just by the scruff of the neck and say, just go and sit in a dark room, with Jesse Norman, or Maria Callas, or go and sit in a room and just and take that. You're taking that away from people who can enjoy it.
But I wonder whether you can even actually have. Sorry, Anne.
No, well, I was going to say, I wonder, how soon before we start condemning our ancestors, cavemen, for being unkind to woolly mammoths? Just how far back do you take things? And every age has its own ethos. Yeah. It is not the ethos we have now, but it's a mug's game to try and impose our standards on people from the past.
Yes.
And yet now that is becoming, absolutely the norm.
What do you think that this does to art? Because I wonder whether I don't think that you can actually have real art that is explicitly political. I think that you destroy artistic expression, the sort of like humanity of it, by trying to instrumentalize it for some kind of political purpose.
Art shouldn't have any when you're working, I don't think art should have any sort of parameters around it. That's the whole point, because as soon as you start putting parameters around it, people then work to those parameters.
But there's also this assumption in there that with the case of the English touring opera, obviously the reason why they want to have more, and when they say diverse, they actually just mean physically, which I think is kind of brutish.
Which is absurd. Can you play the instrument like you're in?
The implication of that is that they think that when touring, that audiences will only associate with them or enjoy the music if they see people who look like them. And it's the same assumption that you get with literature.
It's so patronising.
It is patronising.
It's so patronising. It's assuming that those people can't appreciate music.
Yes, exactly.
It's the same as the idea that you can't like Shakespeare if you're not a white man because you're. Yeah. And actually, this is again this week, the University of Exeter. There is a rebellion brewing amongst the academics there because they've been given guidance to use what they refer to as grey literature, tweets and blogs basically, instead of archives, because apparently the archives are biased, and the quote from this guidance says that archives are not neutral. So again, it's this assumption that people can't appreciate art or relate to it if they are not represented in the identity category of the person creating that art.
But that is just nonsense,
and it's actually quite literally divisive.
Yeah, all my favourite, even though I love opera and I did train in it many years ago, all my favourite singers are all black. I mean, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Chuck Berry. My favourite musicians are all black. Guess what, everyone?
No one's going to take Billie Holiday away from me.
Is that going to be taken away from me? Because it's just absurd. No, music should cross all boundaries, all faiths, all genders, all colours.
Music and literature.
Yeah, music, exactly.
Yes. And actually, that's
music and literature.
That's great level
and art.
But that's why the humanity of it is so, like Shakespeare and the universals, that everyone can relate to it because it's real, because it's human.
Yeah.
Because we aren't our skin colours and our eye colours or our height or our gender or
this is superficial. It's like what's beyond
so
skin.
Just before
I have to say that.
we run to an end. This has gone very quickly.
Run to an end, quick. Open the doors, grease the doors, I'm coming through. Shamima Begum
has done another interview, another wonderfully framed PR exercise to try and come back to the United Kingdom. Yeah. What do you think?
I think she should change her name to E, her first name to E, and then move to Yorkshire. E Begum. E Begum, love. All right.
How weird, man.
How weird, man. We're mixing our accents up.
I asked myself this, at the time that she went out to join the jihadists, they were beheading people, they were crucifying people, they were sacking historic sites, they were behaving like a complete horde of barbarians. Now, she says she was only 15. At 15 and considerably younger than that, I knew it was wrong to run about the place beheading and crucifying people. Didn't she?
Funny, it wasn't a gap year, was it?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't
it's not just your normal going off the rails.
I once smuggled a bottle of Jack Daniels into school. It's terrible, but I never joined ISIS. I never joined a terrorist organisation. Age 15.
I completely agree with you, Anne, because she chose to travel after all of the beheadings of James Foley, Alan Henning. She would have seen all of that. There's no way that she would have been unaware of it, regardless of what she was being fed by, Islamic State recruiters, whatever. She would have been aware of that at 15. I mean, that's not.
And living in a country in which there's free news and she could get it all.
But regardless,
yeah, exactly.
I think the whole debate around it so often just gets taken off on a red herring, because the reason for taking her citizenship away from her, she still does have Bangladeshi citizenship legally.
No, she's not stateless.
But the reason for doing that was a national security decision. But if she's brought back here, she won't see justice, because it's so difficult to get. People will say, well, you need to try her by our own laws and in our own courts, but it's not possible to do that. It's the chances of her seeing justice here are very small.
Yes.
What would happen would be she would go back into the community. She might be on some kind of
community service.
God.
Monitoring.
And ultimately would probably not receive the sort of justice that you would expect from someone who has betrayed their country.
Yes, it would be like a delayed, what's it called, a delayed sentence, when they sort of they give you a sentence, but actually then they change, then they say, well,
suspended.
Suspended, exactly, that's the word, thanks. And when she was interviewed, I noticed she was wearing a Nike baseball cap and looked very West. And I just thought,
nail varnish,
and I just
she
thought,
looked like one of the Kardashians.
She did. It's like, hi, I don't know if you remember me, but I used to be into beheading and stoning women to death.
She doesn't. She still seems to not really grasp the seriousness of having gone to join ISIS, as if that was not. It's still, even in that interview, it still seemed that she doesn't really understand that. Because even if she was just a housewife, she still went to take part in the state-building enterprise of a terrorist proto-state that committed genocide. It's no small thing.
Yes, exactly. We've
got a comment here from Paula from Mile End, who says, and I think this is a really, really interesting point. She says, people forget that she actually renounced her citizenship, no home to come back to. Now, I think most people would agree with Paula that I think is implicit in this comment, which is that citizenship is not just a legal thing, it's a loyalty. If this is your home, you don't go and join a terrorist group that fights against your country. So I think many people would think, well, citizenship is something that is far more than just the letter
it's
of the law.
It's about belonging.
Exactly.
Belonging.
And that she, by going and joining this group, has renounced her citizenship in the most basic sense.
It's called treason. That's what it's called.
If we had treason laws, then we could bring her back and try her according to them, but we don't.
We don't have treason laws anymore. Why is that, Anne? Do we know why we gave them up?
Yeah, the EU.
Oh, God. Back to them again.
And on that note, thank you for joining us. Please like and subscribe if you feel that way inclined, and please join us next time. Thanks very much.
I love our laughter.